This is Claypit Hall, home of the Curry family.
Hello, we're the Curry family. I'm Gerald Curry. It's my wife, Anne, and our eldest son, Andrew. We have two other sons, Alistair and Jonathan, and one daughter, Sally. Our eldest son, Andrew, who's here with us, is the graphic artist. He has a small company working at home here, working from home. Alistair, our second son, is an inspector or a sub-inspector in the Hong Kong police. He joined last April and he's been there about a whole year now. Our third son is taking a degree in Earth Sciences in Cardiff University. And our daughter is doing a business study course in both English and German language. She's doing that at the moment in Northampton College. College, that's right, yes. We've been in this house, I seem to be doing all the talking. We've been in this house about 5 years now, and we moved from Audlem in Cheshire. We'd had several other addresses before then, moving around the country, living north of Chester, south of Chester, and various other places. Anne and myself were born in London and evacuated during the war to Markyate, a small village in Hertfordshire between St Albans and Dunstable. We lived there for about 20 years. One of the things I did just before we were married, I did my national service. I was a flying officer stationed at Marham.
And you were married while you were in the Air Force, because I was an Air Force wife for about 6 months, which was quite exciting.
Anne did some college training as too.
Yes, I went to college in London. I trained as a school teacher. I taught for a little while before I had my family. I went back briefly after my children all started school for about 2 or 3 years, but after that we moved again, and I haven't been back since. We've moved several times during our life, and we spent a lot of time in Cheshire, sometime in Lancashire, and sometime in Norfolk.
That's right.
And eventually we've arrived here, which we like very much, and we hope to stay here. We hope to grow a few roots in this area.
Do you want to say something, Andrew?
Do you want to say anything, Andrew?
Yeah. I'm Andrew, I'm their eldest son. I was born in Luton, which is a bit embarrassing, but never mind. I grew up mostly in Cheshire. I consider Chester to be my hometown. I went to college, a very small college in Hertfordshire called Walhall College of Higher Education. I got a BA in some Mickey Mouse degree. And then I went to America for a while, knocked around there and had a good time, and I came back, and now I draw comics. Relatively unsuccessfully at the moment, but hopefully I'll start making money in the near future. That's about it.
At the moment, Anne and we run a small company from this house. We started about August last year, and we import and sell machine tools, both special purpose and CNC, conventional CNC machines. We've been doing that. We do that together. I do the road work, if you like, and Anne takes care of the office work and typing and reception. Receptionist, should I say. Hardly receptionist at this stage. But is there anything you want to say about?
No, nothing really, except that I spend most of my spare time gardening, as you can see. This is an enormous piece of garden to look after, but I enjoy it very much. It's hard work, but it's great fun. And that's about all we do, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So it seems very, very brief to say that that's all we do, but we seem to have done a lot in the last 30 years. We've been in several old houses, one of which we virtually rebuilt from scratch. We've always had a lot of land. At one time we had a very small farm where we kept pigs and goats and turkeys and chickens, which I had a hand in running, or I did most of it really. And you helped when you had time off, and the boys and Sally helped as well. And I enjoy that very much. In fact, I'd like to do that kind of thing again, but I can't see when or how.
Certainly not the way we're running
Certainly
things
not
here.
the way things are at the moment. No. You seem to travel around the world a lot, don't you? And not at home all the time.
No, that's right.
So we have to keep ourselves busy when we're not here.
No, it's not a bad thing, is it?
No.
Good.
Well,
Everybody.
they're not here all the time. They come and they go. I don't think Alistair will be home again now. He seems to settle very comfortably in Hong Kong. He considers that his home now.
So they kick us out.
Well, till they
That's
kick us out
actually-
in, when is it?
1990?
1998.
1998, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
About 10 years it is, right?
Yeah. So
He-
what
he-
he'll do then, we don't know.
No. Alistair had a change in career. He
Yes.
did his college. He got a degree in civil engineering at Manchester University. He also toured the world. He finished up in Red China and Japan, and after touring America and a bit of South America, and decided finally that he wanted to do something of a military basis, and finished up joining the Hong Kong police, and that's where he is now, as we were saying earlier. Jonathan's not sure. He's thinking he would like to become an airline pilot. Be interesting to see this film in perhaps 10 years and see if he actually made it.
Yeah, he's very much into the environment, and he's doing earth sciences at college. That's really a study of geography, geology, environmental studies. He's very much at the moment concerned with growing trees on slag heaps in Wales and the north of England. Isn't he? That's part of a project that he's doing. We don't know how much success they'll have in doing this. Sally wants to work in Germany.
Right.
She's doing German.
Yes. She's quite
Once-
proficient at the moment in the German language.
But she'd very much like to work there.
She finishes she's in her second year now. She does her third year in England next year, and her fourth year, when she should get an English degree, her fourth year then will be carried out in Germany, when she should get a German degree in the same subjects. Which
This is what I do for a living. I draw comics. This is a comic called No Robbery. It's about page 9, about halfway through the story. What I do first is pencil the figures in, roughly, and then I go over it again and tighten the figures up in pencil. Then I write in the dialogue and write that in again with a felt tip pen. Then I border it with a felt tip pen and a ruler, and then I start inking it in. And I start at the bottom and ink from the bottom back up, because if I start at the top, I use a fairly soft pencil and I'd smudge the drawing quite badly, I think, if I did that. I don't know if I'd make it illegible anyway. It's just a style of mine that I've got into. So, I'm inking the final panel there. It's a story written by my editor, Martin Locke, who at the moment is editor of Harrier Comics, the company I work for. And hopefully this will be published in an omnibus collection, along with a couple of other pieces of my work, and some of my friends' work who also work for Harrier. I don't really know, that's about it.
Well, first of all, welcome to Foxearth Rectory. My name is the Reverend Christopher Cook. I'm rector of 3 parishes, Pedlow, Foxearth, Liston with Bawley. Behind me is Foxearth Rectory, which was built in 1966. They did that because the original rectory was behind here, and it's a touching amount of cost to keep the upkeep of the building. They decided to build a new rectory here in the grounds, which was the original orchard. As you see here, we have the coaching stables here, and you've got the fireplace over in the corner there. Before I took holy orders, I was in fact a research chemist in London. I have a brother 10 years older than myself, Derek, who is a company director in London. In fact, I suppose really want to say I'm the sort of black sheep of the family. But here's my wife, Monica, who's been with me all the time. And I, in fact, went to 3 colleges. The first one was in Kent, the second one in Hertfordshire, and I ended up at Queen's College, Birmingham. And the principal there was John Stapleton Hapgood, that's his name, Stapleton Hapgood. He was the principal there, and in fact he is now Archbishop of York. And I was hoping somehow that, having been tutored by the principal of Queen's College, Birmingham, and he now being the Archbishop of York, I perhaps might be, something might rub off on me, but still, here I am, rector of Foxearth. I live in hope, I live in hope. Monica, is that yourself?
I was born in Kent, in Sevenoaks. My parents actually came from East Kent. And I lived in the same village, which was just across the field from a certain theological college, which is where I, of course, met Christopher.
Yes.
We were married in 1967 and have moved around the county of Essex ever since then.
Yes, in fact, my hometown is in fact Romford, or originally then they used to call it Rumford because there was a shopping hall in Romford, and above it it said not Romford Shopping Hall, but Rumford Shopping Hall. And in fact, I remember walking up North Street, I think it's called, isn't it? Where there used to be the snooker rooms above there. Was it South Street? I can't remember. South Street. Sorry, South Street. Memory's failing. South Street. I used to watch the snooker rooms there, and little did I know that perhaps those days Steve Davis was actually playing. Here he is playing his snooker, and here I am here. He's a champion snooker. Here I am, rector of Foxearth. But my first parish, actually, I served my curacy at St Mary the Virgin, Great Ilford. I spent 3 years there, and after that I then went to the parish of Corringham, and was there for 7 years. From that we then moved to Rowhedge, and the parish officially was called the parish of East Donyland. Finished. Parish of East Donyland. And all my friends, when they heard that I was going to move to East Donyland, they used to mimic me and say East Noddyland. They used to call it East Noddyland, didn't they? Yeah. But we were there for 7 years. Then I was offered this living here in Foxearth. What do you say about it, I think?
We've been here 4 years.
4 years now. Yes. It's been quite an eventful 4 years for us, because we settled in the sort of first year, and the second year?
So 2 years ago we had a burglary, and then in January last year we came home from holidays to find water pouring right through the house from the first pipe.
And so we had a flooded rectory, so our time here has been quite memorable. We remember a lot of things, don't we?
Well, last year we only lived here for 2 months.
We're commuting from actually in Long Melford.
Well, the house was repaired.
Well, the house was repaired. Originally, they thought this driveway here, there should have been a driveway here of a proper entrance to the church, but it never really got off the ground. So in many ways, the church, the house is sort of really back to front, isn't it?
Yeah.
We would like to turn it round, but it won't be possible. And in fact, as you're looking at the house here, this would be probably the last time you'll see the house in its present form with its windows, because the diocese, in conversation with the surveyor yesterday, in fact, I'm going to take all the windows out because they're all rotten. I'm going to replace them. So this will be the last time you'll see the house in its present windows. I can't think of anything else to say about that. Perhaps we now move on to Foxearth Church. And I'll tell you a little bit about the history of it. Before I do that, I'd like to say, in fact, this church has got 3 signs for the clock. It is only the side facing me that tells the correct time. And when Monica and I first moved here, I couldn't sleep at night for that chiming clock. It goes on the quarter every hour for 24 hours a day. In fact, for the first week, I asked Group Captain Baker to stop the clock so I could get some sleep at night. But now, I've got used to it, and when it doesn't chime, it wakes me up. But it is the time that faces us that is the correct time. The other 2 signs are stuck to clock hands, and that is my excuse really for people either not coming to church or being late because they look at the clock and give the wrong time, like the time facing us. So we have in fact a grandfather clock facing us there. Now if you look at the church, originally they had a lovely spire, but I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. Looking at Foxearth Church, and it's not originally as it was. It had a lovely spire, a wooden spire, on the top of that church. And in fact, the tower was added in 1862 in memory of John Foster's, that's the Reverend John Foster's second wife. And in fact, he outlived the daughters. Lovely tower with the wooden spire. But you know, being our freak country that we live in the weather conditions, we had a rather hurricane and strong gales in 1947, and that was blown down, and it blew over to the left-hand side, parting a gap in the lime trees and landing up in the new cemetery. And people wondered what had happened, terrific noise and crashing and sound. They came across and it found it was without its tower. As I said, it was added in 1862. Now, one of the other parishes which I'm rector of is Pentlow. At that time there was the Reverend Henry Ball, and there was a bit of a rivalry between Reverend Henry Ball and the Reverend John Foster. Henry Ball was a rather low churchman and John Foster was a rather high churchman. And when John Foster put his spire on the church, Henry Ball seemed to be rather annoyed, and consequently he built Pentlow Tower. And Pentlow Tower, he maintains, was 10 feet higher than Foxearth. But now, probably, Pentlow Tower is probably a little bit higher, we don't know, unless the land has sunk. But a great rivalry and tension between these two rectors. But Foxearth Church is still known in the villages throughout as the Cathedral Church. They call it the Cathedral Church because of its ornate design and it's most beautifully decorated inside. In fact, looking at it, at the bell tower there, the bell tower up above, the bells, in fact, were made up to 6 when the tower was added, including one bell that was cast by Miles Gray. He was said to have a very good reputation, and 2 bells were added later. It has a total of 8 bells. I think more than that, the actual church really is in the design of Victorian Gothic. An existing part of the church, which you see on this north side, on the left-hand side, is 14th century. Beyond that, you can't seem to find any other information, really, as to the age of the original church here. I think we'll move on now to the church door. We talk more about the history of the church and why it was in fact built in this way and dedicated perhaps to St. Peter and St. Paul. You see the jackdaws flying in. This organ which you see here was in fact in the north part of the church, the north aisle of the church, up at the top end. And many years ago it was moved from there to the spot here where originally the font was, because this is the baptistry as such. But they put the organ here, and you have here a very fine example of what is known as a Father Willis organ, built in 1880. There are only a few organs around the country like this one, and it is said that it's to be the best organ in the district. It has a lot of power, it has a lot of bite, and it's a beautiful sounding instrument. It's called a Father Willis organ mainly because Father Willis, he was known as the daddy of them all, so they called him Father, the Father Willis organ. And it was a very fine organ. It has 2 manuals, a full complement of pedals, and you see these beautiful paintings on the side here by this Italian artist. And you see here the 2 places for the candle. During the days where they didn't have electricity, used to have services by candlelight, candle power as such. But here is the Father Willis organ. And I think it's very fitting to have a Father Willis organ in what is known as the Cathedral Church in Foxearth. Looking at Foxearth Church, before we go into the history of why the church was like this, I think it would be wise to go back into the background to the ornate designs of the church. The Reverend John Keble, on the 14th July 1883, preached a sermon at Oxford on national apostasy. And then his close friend, John Henry Newman, was also vicar of St Mary's, Oxford, with the other theologians, the Reverend Harold Froude, and the Reverend Edward Pusey. This group got together and they were rather disillusioned with the Church of England as it stood in those days. And they published what is known as the number of tracts for the times. And they became known as Tractarians. And these tracts were in fact published between 1833 and 1841. Later, John Henry Newman entered the Roman Catholic Church and became known as Cardinal Newman. This movement became known as the Oxford Movement, and it brought about a marked improvement in the standards of worship in parish churches and in more reverent observances of the sacraments. You see, after the Reformation, things were very dull and very plain. They removed the candles from the altar. It was plain and simple. No Roman Catholicism. Throw it all out. Destroy it all. But this movement thought that the church needed revitalising. And so they wanted a more reverent observance of the sacraments and a greater concern for order and beauty within the church. The Oxford movement laid stress on ritual and vestments. As you see on the altar here, we have the 6 candles. Very God, Jesus, the light of the world. Emphasis on the priesthood and the centrality of the altar as its rite. The central focus for the Oxford movement was the altar, representing our Lord on the night before he was betrayed, having supper with his disciples, the sacrament of the Holy Communion. And this Oxford movement brought about a real improvement in pastoral care, and especially in the industrial areas and in the East End London parishes. And much heroic work was done by Anglo-Catholic priests. And so it is with this background that the Reverend John Foster came here to Foxearth. And no doubt the Oxford movement meant a lot to him. And because it did so, he made this church as it was in this tradition, to venerate all the saints, as you see up at the altar, the paintings of the saints done by this Italian artist. And above it, the stained glass windows. And in fact, the windows were in fact painted glass and not real stained glass. The whole beauty of it symbolises the majesty and splendour of God. And this is what the Oxford movement really brought about, because it is said that when John Henry Newman preached, men saw visions and dreamed dreams. And I feel sure that this is what John Foster wanted for this church. They wanted people to look at this church and see a vision of God, that men could see visions and dream dreams. This vestry here and the window depicts John Foster's wife and daughters. Sadly, as I said before, it was painted glass and the face details have gone. And much of the stained glass has now been replaced or taken out for the plain glass. But such was the devotion of John Foster for his loved one, that this window has been dedicated to his wife and daughters. His wife was Rosalind. As it says below, to the glory of God, born in memory of his servant Rosalind, wife of John Foster, Master of Arts, clerk and rector of this parish. I should like to point out that the word of it says clerk. Although I am rector of this parish, my official title is Christopher Cook, clerk in Holy Orders. Looking at this side window in this later chapel, we have a most beautiful glass paintings given in memory of John Foster's, it says here, the 3 sisters. Looking at it, we think this was probably his 3 daughters, as the age were 2 years, we think 4 years, and 4 years. It's very difficult to decipher. But you see how John Foster felt for his family. He dedicated this so that this would be a true memorial of those whom he loved, and so all could look upon it. And particularly appropriate is it for here because in this Lady Chapel, this is where the Blessed Sacrament is always kept here. We had the light above, which is showing that is kept here. And on the altar over here, we have the reserved sacrament. The bread and the wine is always kept here for emergency, for those who want to receive communion in desperate need or at any times. And also it is a source of devotion as well. And it is said that a church that has the sacrament in it is a church that feels warm, at home, and where God is to be found. Again, looking at these windows, they were all stained glass, painted glass. And sadly, they were taken out to give more light in the church. Have you had the plain window in the centre? But you see, they protect the Old Testament people, Noah, on the right-hand side. The whole history of the Christian church seems to be summarised in Foxearth Church. The expansion of God in the Bible is pictured here. John Foster was responsible for all the internal decorations and the medieval paintings on the wall, particularly in this chancel. The nave ones sadly have now gone. As I said before, these were done by the Italian artists and reflects again this effect upon the Oxford movement. I don't know whether Foxearth Church actually had a dedication in the 14th century, but it is in fact now dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul, appropriately thinking of Peter being the rock of the church, and Peter being linked very much closely with Rome. The church today is thinking about the ordination of women to the priesthood. And here we have the saints, the ladies. This is the ladies' side. St. Prisca, St. Agatha, St. Agnes, Evrida. All the saints here are the ladies who have been venerated. As it says under these, grant us grace so to follow the blessed saints in all virtuous and godly living. The other side, we saw just beforehand, were the gentleman's side, the men saints. And the story is that this Italian artist who painted this, he started at this west end, at this east end of the altar, and as he progressed down to the west end, the opposite end to the altar, the painting is rather deteriorated. Perhaps he was in a bit of a hurry, we don't know how long it took. But you see the actual roofing up there, all this was painted, highly decorated. Here we have now the new baptismary quarter of the church, and so this original font was where the organ was. It's got a lovely, beautiful, ornate font cover on top, which actually lifts off by the hanging weight in the corner. And it's unusual because on the top of it, it has an eagle picking its own breast so it can feed its young. The lifting is very gentle. It's just lifting up, and up it goes by the concrete weight on the other side. When I came to this church 4 years ago, I was rather puzzled by having two patens and two chalices. The reason being is that they've been dedicated by John Foster to his two wives. This chalice is dedicated to Rosalind Foster, 1865, that's his second wife, and this chalice is dedicated to his first wife, Margaret Foster, 1846. So 1846 and 1865 John Foster has dedicated these two beautiful, ornate silver chalices in memory of his beloved wives. Amazing, it shows really the depth of this man, how he felt for people and how he wanted to preserve their memory in silver, in this church. So really this church is really a John Foster church. It is in John's memory that we see everything here and his family around. This porch to which I'm standing, for obvious reason, being a lovely summer's day pouring with rain, was added in 1948 in memory of John Foster's first wife, Margaret. And here we have the list of the names of the rectors of Foxearth, starting from 1294 up to myself here in 1984, when I first came here. Rectors of Foxearth. Porch added in memory of his first wife and Margaret. Now I don't mind getting wet. If we come outside here, I'll do this in memory of John Foster, particularly on this lovely day. Here we have the grave of John Foster. This is where he lies interred here. This is John Foster's grave. Next to the church, so people who come up the driveway along the church path can look here and see this is John Foster. And one thing about this is that he is buried facing the east. Facing the east, facing Jerusalem. Because that is where the church faces. It faces east. It's facing the holy city. And I hope at the end of this visit that you'll think of John Foster building this church in the holy city. There surely he must rest. And I'm grateful as being rector here of Foxearth to step into his parish, into his memory, and into his heart. March 1892, 46 years rector of Foxearth. May he truly rest in peace.
Hello, I'm Sarah Nicholson and this is my mother, Mrs Nicholson. We live at 7 Claypits Road, Foxearth. We have lived here for 20 years. My mother was an Ipswich girl and I was born in Ipswich. My father was a Yorkshire man. We've almost become to live here in Foxearth as a home now after 20 years. I actually work in Sudbury for a small private craft industry, the Gainsborough Silk Weaving Company. My main job is sales, although I am deeply involved with everyday management, personnel, production and everything else that goes on within the company. Apart from work, one of my main hobbies is swimming. I have an early morning ticket to go swimming as an early morning riser at the Kingfisher Leisure Pool in Sudbury. So bright and early in the morning before work, swimming is my number one priority. Apart from swimming, I ballroom dance, both Latin and ballroom dancing. Not so much now as in the past. In the past, I actually spent at least 2, if not 3 evenings as a student teacher, teaching dancing in my spare time in evening classes and at the community centre. I've dried out.
Hello, I'm Dennis South. I live at number 16 Claypits Road. Originally I was born in London but moved down here in 1940. I served in Cyprus during the campaign between 1957 and 1959. And I'm now working as a jobbing builder around the villages.
What regiment was you in?
Suffolk Regiment.
You was in the Suffolk Regiment? Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is Claypits Road. These bungalows were built in the early 1950s. These two blocks were built in 1935. These houses were built in the late 40s, early 50s. That is the old police. This is Whitegates, home of the Bull family.
My name's Steve Bull. We've lived in Foxearth for 2 years now. This is my wife Pat.
Well, this is my son Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. This is my son Andrew. My brother Andrew.
Hi, my name's Andrew Bull. This is my brother David.
My name's David Bull. This is my brother Chris.
Hello, my dad name's Christopher and he's my little brother.
What are your hobbies, Steve? You can say your hobbies.
Hobbies? I like to do a bit of shooting, a bit of rough shooting, pigeon shooting, that sort of thing. I've just started getting back into doing some weight training again, which I haven't done for a few years. Reason I packed it up was because when we moved here there was quite a lot to do to the house, and we've only just finished things, and I've managed to get a bit more free time now. My eldest son goes to Scouts.
Yeah, and Andrew goes to
Andrew
Scouts.
goes to Scouts.
David goes to Cubs, and Chris is soon to go to Cubs. And Matthew doesn't do anything yet, do you, Matthew? I enjoy swimming and cycling and cooking. Do a lot of cooking. And before I married Steve, I was a hairdresser. And you can say your occupation.
Yeah, I'm a design draftsman. I sort of design heating, ventilating systems for industrial premises. Been doing that since I left school. I've worked for myself now. Not a lot to say about that, really. We used to live at Castle Camps, which is a small village, not as small as this village, but fairly small in South Cambridgeshire.
Yeah, we lived there for 9 years.
We lived there for 9 years.
But we had to build a house, didn't we? Yeah, the house got too small, so we had to find this place.
I'm just going to say a little bit about Scouts, because we're in this area, we shouldn't really be in Clare Scouts, but we really enjoy it. It's a great Scouts. So we've been on quite a few camps, and so has Andrew. And as Mum says, I also enjoy cooking, so I'm going to be doing my cook's badge, and I've done my camp cook quite a few badges now. I think Andrew likes to talk about it.
Yeah, I've got a rabbit toolkit, and my hobbies are I like snooker and I like feeding my rabbit bit. And David's got a rabbit called Chuck, and he's just about to talk. Say how long you've had Chuck.
I've had Chuck for about, he's a baby, and I've had him for about 2 months and a half now. And I go to clubs and quite busy clubs, and I like it there.
You like swimming and sleeping, don't you?
You're playing on your bike, it's alright.
You go to Foxearth School, you lads?
Yes,
Yeah.
you go to Foxearth.
I go to Foxearth School, enjoy riding on my bike, I enjoy swimming. Nothing.
What about you?
Turn around.
Turn around. Say what you like like doing? What you like playing?
What's your favourite lessons at school?
Like drawing. Yeah.
Colouring. So is that it? I'll just say, I don't go to Foxearth School anymore. I've never been, because I went to a primary school where we used to live. I now go to Headingham, which is a good school. I would go to Clare, but it's out of the district. It's a good school and I enjoy it because they have a lot of sports and they also have shot put and I enjoy that a lot. Now I've done it.
I'm going up to Headingham soon and I'm a bit nervous. When I go out, I want to be a vet because I enjoy wildlife and animals. We have lots of birds nesting in our garden. Blue-tip robin. Yeah, and David's very interested as well. I hang out with him.
Tomorrow we'll be going to a butterfly sanctuary. We see a lot of butterflies here and we also see insects. Now as we could. I think that's about it.
Okay. I'm Stuart Ham, and this is my son James, who's 11 months.
And I'm Sally Ham. I've been married for 8 years. We married in 1980. When we were first married, yes, we lived at the stables, and now we're living in the main house, which is called Farthings.
Well, I'm a surveyor by trade. I've probably worked from home since 1972. And prior to that, I was working for a local building company in Sudbury. I've lived here 41 years now, all my life. My parents kept what was the shop and post office before. My grandparents moved here in 1909 and took the business, bringing my father when he was only 6 months old. And probably the reason for that, he used to train trotters, raise and train trotters, and he lost his leg in a trotting accident. And he came to take the business then. My mother carried on the business during the war years while my father was abroad. And
he was in the Air Force too?
He was in the RAF, yes. Yeah. And when he came home, he shared the business and was the village postman. And my mother ran, obviously, the shop and looked after myself and my two sisters. I'm the only one that's remained in the village. The business was closed in about 1968, and that was the end really of the village shop and post office. Left the village with no sort of shop or anything, and we obviously all moved away from sort of the grocery business.
Do you want a second? Yeah. My mum and dad kept the bull at Cavendish, and my grandfather, Bill Ashby, kept the Pink Cure Arms at Pentlow. With all that background, I ended up in the catering industry, and I worked in London for about 4 years, and then more locally. Now I don't do anything like that apart from home cooking. I just help Stuart with his books and do the typing, and also when he goes out on surveys, if it's a large one, I help hold the tape and call out the measurements for him. Though it's a bit more difficult since James was born, as he sometimes gets in the way and it's a bit of a pickle.
As you can see.
My hobbies are reading when I have time. walking, which is quite easy with a little one. You can just bung them in the buggy or in the backpack and away we go. And a little bit of needlework. But apart from that, I can't think of anything else to say.
Well, we've talked about the walking. We both enjoy walking and camping. I used to play rugby for 12 seasons, and I'm now too old, but enjoy watching. I make homemade wine and beer. Enjoy my beer. Still drink at the family hostelry at Tinkers. We've got handy around the house, I think, so that takes up a lot of time.
Yes. At the moment we've only lived here a couple of months because we moved in after Stuart's mother died, and we're doing different things to the house. We hope to redecorate completely upstairs and do various different things with the bathroom and bits and pieces like that, and also alter the garden, which is Stuart's job.
Yeah, it's generally trying to bring the house back to what it was. Obviously it's quite old, oak-framed house built latter part of the 16th century. It's a Grade 2 listed building, so we're restricted with the local authorities to what we do. But hopefully we're doing it as it would have originally been.
I think you could tell me one of your mum's famous stories of when she kept the post office when your father was...
I'll bring them under mind, really.
Well, when the tank came through the brick wall and the baby was in the pram.
Certainly during the war years, I guess the post office was sort of the centre because there was obviously money passing through for pensions and what have you. And obviously it was the centre of information, really. Probably like a Citizens Advice Bureau would be now. Only it was all obviously a voluntary situation. And certainly we had a big Italian prisoner war camp at Liston. And obviously there was a lot of troop movement during the war. And one of the tales was my mother was sticking insurance stamps on somebody's card, and a tank came around the corner and actually went over our front wall, missing a pram that was parked in the front garden. My mother was so shocked that she actually swallowed the stamp. We always laughed about that. But, I suppose the house was used during the war with refugees. In spite of all that was done, refugees were here. And, I guess the business was really quite active, as the village would have been. And that obviously has changed with the closure of the village industry.
This is Mole End Place, home of Colonel and Mrs. Clark.
I've been in this area for about 3 years now. I was a regular soldier. I was commissioned before the war, and I fought all through the war, fought at Dunkirk and so on. And after the war I stayed on and went on to the weapon design side. I was designing things like jumping mines, which would kill everybody within a distance of 50 yards. But really I felt there was more to life probably than this, and the opportunity came in '59 when I was approached by a firm to see if I would join them in civil life. So I took the opportunity and became their Director of Research and Development. The firm was called Hoffman in Chelmsford, and I spent a very happy 6 or 7 years there. Then the time came to move on. I did consultancy work. During that time, I set up a trade union, you might call it, for professional engineers. Because at the end of the 60s, the trade unions were very strong. They were trying to encroach on the professional sphere and bring people in who were not really of their turn of mind. So we set up a very successful union called UCAPE, United Kingdom Association of Professional Engineers. Then in the middle 70s, I retired and I set up a literary society called the Dorothy L. Sayers Society, which immediately took off, and we now have about 500 members, both in this country and in the USA. We publish a lot of things, and I find great satisfaction in that work. I do like to feel that the world has been perhaps a different place from when I came into it, and I haven't entirely wasted my time on this earth. We're having a very pleasant time in the meanwhile. Just after I came to Penclow 3 years ago, to a lovely house called Penclow Mill, my wife died, much to my regret, my 3 children and I. And after a year or two, I met my present wife, Anne Daly, maiden name then Anne Dobson. She did me the honour of accepting my proposal, and we got married last year. She is a widower. We each have 10 grandchildren, and so we have a fine, noisy family of grandchildren between us and 20. We are selling this house, which is her house, and she will be moving to my house, Penclow Mill, within the course of the next few months. We're just waiting now for some people to come and look round the house. I think that my wife is arriving at the moment, and that's all I really have to say for myself. And this is my wife, Anne, who's just arrived. You carry on, darling.
Well, I only came to live in the village about 2.5 years ago, and I liked it very much indeed. Everyone's been very nice. And because I've married Rafe, I'm going to leave it very soon when I've sold this house, very sadly, because I don't want to go. And I've had a checkered career, born in India, of military family, and married a military man, and he died rather young, leaving me with a lot of children who I had to bring up. And when I had brought them up, I came to live here in a sort of retirement way, and have had the great good fortune to meet another military man. And now, Mr. Hastie, what other things shall I tell you? During the war, I served as a naval VAD, starting off in Plymouth, and then went to Bristol, to an officers' hospital, and then I went to Malta for a couple of years, and ended up in Sicily, taking over a hospital which had been commandeered by the Germans and then taken over by the 8th Army. And the Germans, when they left, had blown up all the operating theatres and x-ray rooms and everything else, which was very sad for the town of Messina, because it was their local hospital. And then I was demobbed in Haslar, another naval hospital. And I think that's all I can tell you about the war.
You were born in Simla?
Oh, yes, I was born in Simla, and later went back to India as a child, and had a wonderful time there. Thoroughly enjoyed being one of the Raj.
This is Hunter's Lodge, home of David Ward.
I'm David Ward, and I live at Hunter's Lodge, Foxearth, where my family have lived for 250 years. And the sad thing is, of course, that we own the lovely old family brewery here, which was sold in 1957 for various reasons, basically death duties. It was started by my great-grandfather in 1838 and it was developed largely by my own grandfather, and sadly he wouldn't part with his money, and we had to sell up, as I say, in 1957. In 1888, the brewery was rebuilt and a new brewery was put up, a very, very fine modern brewery in its time, and that was added to again in 1897 when more fermenting room space was built because the business was growing so fast. And in fact, we were selling beer from the Thames to the Wash, which is not bad for a small enterprise in a small village in the northern tip of Essex. We in fact sold our famous Imperial Ale at the House of Commons for many, many years, and up until the war. We employed 47 people, and it was a lovely country brewery, and it produced some very good ale, and in fact we took more first prizes at the Brewers International Exhibition at originally the old Agricultural Hall in London and later on at Olympia than any other brewer in the United Kingdom. It was sad when we had to sell up in 1957. My father sadly only died last year. He was a great member of the Fighting Cocks, as they were called, which was number 43 Squadron in the Royal Flying Corps, and was, apart from Lord Balfour, the last officer surviving the Royal Flying Corps in the First War of 43 Squadron. I myself was in the Royal Air Force during the last war, 39 to 45, because my uncle was also in the Royal Flying Corps, he having commanded number 10 Squadron and shot down 29 German aircraft and awarded the MC and Bar. He was Major George Bernard Ward. So naturally, with a background of father and uncle in the Royal Flying Corps, it was a natural for me to go into the Royal Air Force, and I trained in Rhodesia as a pilot myself. The war, in fact, finished before I had to fly an aircraft and fire in anger at the enemy. I subsequently married a Miss King from Brinkley Hall near Newmarket, funnily enough, whose family were connected with Green King and Sons, the famous Harris and Evans brewers, although her own family were the landowners. And we had one daughter, but sadly no son. And I retired about 8 years ago because my wife was very ill with multiple sclerosis, and I wanted to be with her and look after her. We sold the brewery in 1957 to Taylor Walker, big London brewers, who were in turn taken over by Incoop. And I then created a precedent in as much as I made a reverse takeover bid and bought back my family brewery and all the pubs and most of the village of Foxearth in 1960 before selling out again in 1965 to Charrington United Breweries. When I retired in 1980, I've wrecked from Charrington's and I am now living in my old home in Foxearth, which I enjoy. Thank you very much.
This is Piper's Cottage, home of Felix and Ada Emerson.
My name is Felix Emerson. This is my wife Ada. Do you want me to carry on?
Yes, please.
We have one daughter. I was born in Dennington, Suffolk. Left school, became apprenticed to a large firm of agricultural machinery dealers. Worked for this firm up to the war years. After the war, joined an oil company as a sales representative. Came to Foxearth in 1968, worked for a brewery in wine and spirits department. Then a local chemical company till retirement. Have lived in Foxearth 20 years. That's my lot.
Yeah, I was born in Earlsome, which is in Suffolk. When I left school, I helped my parents to run their business. When I was 18, I was directed into war work, and I worked in a children's home for evacuees in the Isle of Ely. From there, I returned home after the war, and I continued to help my parents to run their business until I met and married Felix. And then we came to Foxearth, and I've enjoyed living in this pretty little village, and it's very quiet and comfortable place to live. Will that do?
This is St. Anthony's, home of Jean Waite.
Hello, my name's Jean Waite. I've lived here since 1985, November. I lived in London originally. I moved to Kent, and from Kent I went to Germany for 3 years. After that I came back here. I knew nothing about Suffolk, nothing about Foxearth, and I consider myself very lucky to have got here. I'm a deputy head at Cornwall Middle School, and that's really about all I've got to say.
This is number 1, the bungalow, the street, home of Margaret and Jeff Sycamore.
Where's it done?
Hello, I'm Jeff Sycamore. This is my wife Margaret here. We've lived in Foxearth for about 28 years. I was born not far away at Belton Water. I lived there for about 2 years, and then we moved to Beers, where I was brought up, and went to village school in Beers. I left school at 14 and went to work on a fruit farm until I was 17. I thought it would be a good idea then to join the army, so I joined the Royal Engineers and served in those for 5 years, 3 of them in Malaya. When I came out, I went to work at Ernest Doe's, the Agricultural Engineers, and soon after that I met my wife Margaret here. And we got married. We lived in Beers for about 3 years, and then we moved to Foxearth here, where we brought up our family. I think that's about it for what I can think of for the moment.
Me?
Yes.
Well, I'm Margaret Sycamore. I was born and brought up at Colchester. I left school at 15.
I went into a local clothing manufacturing company as a tailoress. I met and married Jeff in 1957 and we came to live at Billers. After 3 years we moved to Foxearth and we've been here for 28 years. I then went to Vanna's Silk Company in Sudbury as a silk examiner until our family came along, which is we have a married son and a single daughter. I now work at the local school at Foxearth doing school lunches, which is quite interesting. When we came here we thought Foxearth was a pretty little village. We still think so and we like it very much. That's it.
This is Barley House, home of Barry and Shirley Philpotts.
Hello, I'm Barry Philpotts. This is my wife Shirley, my daughter Nicola, who's nearly 6, and Katie, who's just over 8 months. I'm a chartered accountant working in Sudbury for Norman Green and Company. I joined them from school and have been there 20 odd years. I'm a Sudbury man myself. I was born in Sudbury in St Leonard's Hospital and went to Sudbury Grammar School. I met my wife who lived over at Gosfield. I enjoy playing cricket for Castle Hedingham. And recently my wife has got very interested in small antiques and things, and most of our weekends seem to be taken up going to antique book sales and things like that. And I was trying to get an interest in something and decided that I will collect old tools, hand tools, carpenter's tools and things like that. Nicola attends the local school. I think she appears on the video a bit earlier as well, doing this, that and the other. This is my dog Sam down on the floor here. He's a Labrador, 10, just over 10 years old. That's it, Sam, good old lick.
This is Hall Cottage, home of Vince and Mary Sayward.
Good afternoon, I'm Vince Sayward. This is my wife Mary.
Hello. Vince and I have both lived in Foxearth for 2 years now, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 2 years. We moved here from Chelmsford. We really wanted to live in a rural situation, away from, I guess, the town where we work, etc.
So, although we have a long journey, both of us, we sort of enjoy being in Foxearth at weekends and obviously making the most of the summer months where we can. We've worked very hard on our garden and our house, which we're very proud of, aren't we?
Yes. Well, the house is quite interesting in that it's 3 various ages. The kitchen and dining room are 250 years old. Then there was another floor put on top of that about 100 years ago. Then this side of the house was added about 6 or 7 years ago. But we like it very much here, getting away from especially at the weekend.
And we like the people as well, don't we? People are very friendly. seem to have settled into that quite well. Well, I think we'd appreciate a village pub, wouldn't we, or something like that. We have to go up to Pentlow for that, but apart from that, we haven't really.
And what do you do for a living?
I work in marketing for a Ford Motor Company. I've been there for about 30 years now.
Man and boy.
Man and boy.
And also marketing, actually. Just about 6 months ago, myself and a partner started up a new marketing company. So, although we're very young, we seem to be doing okay so far. So I've just got sort of great aspirations for the future. Into golf promotion and things. I don't play myself, but lots of people do. So I think that's where the money's to be made. Obviously, I'd like to retire one of these days, but then so would you, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So you want to be a kept man. I think so.
This is Glebe Cottage, home of the Flynn family.
Over there. This is the family. I'm Albert Flynn.
I'm Denise Flynn.
And that's Denise Flynn. This is the star of the family, Louise Flynn. And this is the shy one, Katie Flynn. Now, we're comparative strangers, I suppose, because we've only been here 18 months. But we call this our home. So we love Foxearth, and we love the people in it. We've done a great many things, travelled about a bit, but we think we're very, very lucky to have found a place like Foxearth anyway, to come to rest in. My trade at the moment, and it's quite varied, I'm a construction builder at the moment, and I'm converting Constable Barn. In fact, it's near completion. We had designs in living in that barn ourselves. It's turned out very, very nice indeed. But we've fallen in love with this particular spot so much. As you can see, we're putting an extension on this at the moment, and the job is too. It's obvious from those around us, you can see we love pets. Apart from 4 cats, most of these we've had, I might say, because we've saved them from being put down by other people. We've got a goat behind us here. That's called BJ. That was going to be put down. We've got 4 cats.
I might
2
have
dogs.
went to school the other
Yes.
Went to
Couple of
school
ducks.
last week.
Yes.
Goat.
Yes, the goat's constantly getting out and creating havoc. We've got a parrot and a cat. We bought that back with us actually from South Africa. And we've got a monkey. He's a lovable creature. Perhaps you'd like to see him later. The children, perhaps you might go in and give us some entertainment. Now, whilst we were in South Africa, we did many varied things, several businesses out there, from selling African arts to the South Africans and shooing after Bantu Nation. That was an exciting episode in our life. And as I say, we've come to rest in the Foxearth, and we think we're very, very lucky. Now, is there anything you'd like to say? The wife actually is we bought, since we've been back actually, we bought 3 houses, the last one being the Red Lion at La Marche. The wife used to take her part in that business, in all those businesses, was the catering side, and I must say she did a fantastic job.
But I'm now working at...
Now she's doing a part-time job, aren't you?
Yeah, I work for Sue Ryder Home, and I'm auxiliary nursing. And I enjoy that very much. It's a very well worth. Yeah. It's at Cavendish, which again is another lovely little village, isn't it? And not far from here.
As I say, we can see ourselves very lucky, don't we? Yeah. We love it. We love the school. The children love it too. Yeah. There's plenty to do. This one's fully occupied with a girl guide and a horse riding and a majorettes and a swimming. So there's plenty to do. This one's a star in the making, this one.
We just hope the villages carry on, don't we? So many of the
Oh,
villages
yeah,
are disappearing.
As I say, we're grateful for the opportunity of participating in the making of this particular film, and that we're grateful in another respect that we can invite in this particular way people into our home. We don't fraternise a lot. We don't go out a great deal simply because we consider we work fairly hard. We've got 2 young children, and we don't get a lot of opportunity out of that. But, on that note, actually, I think perhaps you children might like to go in with the monkey, and we get a snap of you, shall we?
Yeah, she's trying to get on there. Yeah. Come on, Bimba. Bimba. He's been nervous, look. See, you've got a nervous noise. Come on. Come on in. You're supposed to, you are. Leave him do his thing. That's it. You've been knitting her in a minute. You've been knitting her.
This is Well Cottage, home of the Wilkinson family.
I'll introduce you both first. Hello, I'm Kevin Wilkinson, and these are my 2 daughters, Elsa, who is very nearly 18, and Ruth, who is 13. We came to the village from Kent over 8 years ago. We previously lived in one house in the village, and we've been in this present house for a year. I work at the Sue Ryder home at Cavendish, where I'm the deputy administrator. Both my daughters went to the village school here in Foxearth before going on to Headingham School. Do you want to say anything, Elsa?
Hello, my name's Elsa Wilkinson. I'm nearly 18. I've been going to Headingham School. I've just finished my course in business study and I'm hoping to find a secretarial career.
Do you want to say anything, Ruth? You don't want to say anything? We seem to have run out of words, which is very bad, because usually they've got an awful lot to say. So I think that's about all we have to say.
This is Fairfields, home of Eileen and Kent Smith.
I'm Ken Smith. My wife Eileen and I have lived in Foxearth for 18 years. We came from Ware in Hertfordshire, and previous to that we lived in Cape Town, South Africa for 16 years. I have been working at Stephen Waters in Sudbury for 15 years, and I'm retiring this year on July the 1st, when I'm sure I shall find plenty to do in the garden.
I'm Eileen Smith and was born in Northern Ireland, where I lived until I went to South Africa in 1948, where I met Ken, my husband, and from then on my history is much the same as his.
This is number 2, Rosebank, home of Mike and Jill Morgan. This is number 1, Rosebank, home of Eleanor Hodder.
My name is Mike Morgan. I'm 54 years old, and we have lived at this present address for the past 18 years, since 1969. Although in fact we first moved into the village in 1958, 30 years ago, when we first came here when I was appointed as village police constable. since leaving that job, my present occupation now is that I work for Cannon Davy Safe, which is a small production factory unit situated at Lower Road, Glemsford, about 2 miles from here. My special job is a database computer controller of inventory, finished inventory. I think that's about all for me.
I'm Jill Morgan, and like my husband, I'm not a native of East Anglia. In fact, I come from Oxford, but I married Mike when he was already in the Essex Police Force. And so once we were married and had a family, we moved around quite a bit, ending up here. We have 2 daughters, Alison and Deborah. They are 31 and 28 now, but they don't live here anymore. They have careers as graphic designers, and one lives in Bristol and one lives in Staffordshire. But they both went to the little Foxearth village school, going on to the Sudbury schools when they were 11. My job is Principal Education Welfare Officer, and I work from County Hall in Ipswich, and I travel all over Suffolk visiting schools and teachers and families. Our main hobby is singing, which takes us all over this region, and we perform in cathedrals and churches, and we give concerts wherever people want us to give concerts, and we make records and cassettes. Apart from that, I would like to have more time to do painting. My husband would like to have more time to read, I think, which is his other hobby. And when we're here at the weekends, our time is taken with keeping up with this large garden.
My name is Eleanor Hodder. My husband's name was William Harry Hodder, but he was generally known as Pat because he was born on St. Patrick's Day. Sadly, he died just over 2 years ago when he was nearly 80. I still live in the same house. Before we came to Foxearth, we led rather a wandering life. I started as a dancer and became an examiner for the Digitised Society. My husband worked in a city bank. The war took us abroad. Pat joined the Essex Regiment and served in West Africa, the Western Desert and Cairo. I joined the Fannies and served with Subversive Operations Executive in Algiers, Italy and Cairo. After the war, my husband joined the Colonial Service and I accompanied him to Uganda. On retirement, we went to live in Portugal, where we enjoyed the sun and sea for 12 years. As the years advanced, we thought we should return to our roots. As we both loved the English countryside, we eventually turned up in Foxearth, where we found a most welcoming community. I have always painted as a hobby, and now I have taken it up more seriously. Since my husband's death, I have had amazing support from my neighbours.
This is Mill Road Cottage, home of Horry and Kathy Clade.
Hello, I'm Kath Clade. This is my husband Horace. This is my mother, who's 91. This is my daughter Patsy. My husband's in the 8th Army. After coming out of the army, he worked on the farm and then on to the brewery. And I'm a school caretaker cleaner. Yeah. My mother's lived here in this house for, what is it, 50 odd years? Yeah.
Since 1937 anyway.
Since 1937, you say?
Yes.
Yeah. And your mother's name is Mrs. Steggles, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. I'll just take a look at your car. Patsy. And where did you serve during the war, Horace?
I served in North Africa, Tripoli, Cairo, and I came up to Austria, and then we went over to Italy.
You went I see, yes. And you was in the Royal
I
Artillery?
was in the Royal Artillery in the 8th Army.
Oh, yes.
And I served 6 years.
Did you?
Abroad.
All right, yeah. Well done. This is Belly Bones, home of Morris and Pat James.
My name is Pat James, and I've lived in Foxearth now for about 25 years, in this house which is called Belly Bones. These are my children, Ben and Polly Turpin. Ben is 19 and Polly is 16, and these are the family dogs, Gypsy, who's a lurcher, and Flossie, the grey one, who's a lurcher, and Katie, who's a mongrel, but beautiful. When I came to live here 25 years ago, there was no water and no electricity and no sewage in the house, and nobody wanted these sort of houses. The house with 4 acres of land cost £850. I'm 47 and I work in Halstead. I've worked in a school in Halstead for 20 years. It's a special school for maladjusted children. And I love it. I teach home economics there, home economics and moving parts. Hey Ben?
My name's Ben Turpin and I work on a local farm, Eastern Smith's farm, Mr Barton. And I'm going to Rickle in September to do an NDA. Okay, Polly?
My name's Polly Turpin and I'm working part-time in solar, and I'm going to college this September to do a BTEC course in secretarial work.
My husband hasn't appeared on this film because he's camera shy. He won't appear on it at all, but his name is Morris James. And he's somewhere in the garden gardening. I think that's all we've got to say now.
He's hiding.
Yeah.
This is number 2 Glebeside, home of Ivor and Monica Hillman.
Hello, I'm Ivor Hillman.
And I'm Monica Hillman. We've lived here 26 years.
26 years now, yeah. And we've been involved in a variety of things in the village. I was treasurer of the cricket club and secretary of the village club for some time.
Yes, I'm a member of the WI, have been ever since we lived here.
And we also get involved in all sorts of other things. We seem to be one of those families that gets roped in to do things when things are happening, you know, like jumble sales. Monica's always getting ERO to run a stall or something.
These houses, when we first moved, belonged to the brewery, but when it was taken over by Bass Jarrington...
Yeah, dog.
Can you stop? Bass Jarrington, we bought the house. I think they were built about 1900 for brewery workers. We've got 2 daughters, twin daughters, they're 28. One's married and expecting a baby, and the other one's out to work. She works at a big hotel in Ipswich. The other one, when she's working, is an ambulance driver.
Originally I came here to work for the brewery, but the brewery at Foxearth is now closed down. I'm still working for the same company, which is now Bass. But I have to travel to Basildon every day, where my office is, and I look after their pubs over the whole of East Anglia. Monica works at the day hospital.
Yes, Walnut Tree Hospital, which is a geriatric hospital. I work in the day hospital, in the occupational therapy department. For our leisure, we sail at Aldborough, go walking in the Lake District, and get involved in things here. That's about it.
Yeah, just about sums up what we do and how we are.
We have a very noisy dog.
This is Red House Farm, home of Bob and Mary Jackson. Formerly it was called Carbonell's, after William Carbonell who owned this place in 1351.
Hello, this is Mary Jackson, and this is my husband Rob. We have lived here for over 42 years. We married in 1946. Before I married, I lived at Cavendish with my parents. They had a business of grocery and bakery business, and I worked with them until I married. I was blessed with one son and one daughter. David farms at Pentlow, and Elizabeth married a farmer, and she lives at Great Bableston.
Hi, I'm Bob Jackson, and this is my wife Mary, and we've lived here for 40 years since we married in 1946, and we've got two farms. Which we farm in conjunction with one another. One where my son lives at Pentlow called Skillet, and Red House Farm where we are now. And all told we have 420 acres of arable and grass. We are what we call mixed farmers. Corn, wheat, barley, sugar beet, grape, peas occasionally. And I have 6 grandchildren, 3 at Pentlow and 3 at Mapleston.
You're going to show us your dairy, Bob, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think now, Tom, we'll go under wind, and if you like, come and have a look at the dairy. Now, Tom, we are in the old dairy where we, you can see we got 2 milk pans, one where we put the milk in the morning, and one which we put it in the evening, and the next morning our cream is skimmed off for the family to use, or the daughter, and my son have some, we have some occasionally, and on the right hand side of me you will see the 27-pound old English cured ham, and also the bacon just above it, which also came off the same pig. And you eat that according to how big appetite you have for breakfast.
That's a ham hanging underneath.
Ham is on the bottom, weigh 27 pounds, and the bacon also above it is pickled in the same pickle. And the bacon you eat according to how much appetite you've got for the morning.
The recipe was 100 years old that I cured it from.
Oh, yeah.
Jolly good.
Yeah, I believe it. Bad for you.
No
It is
way.
really.
No way.
High cholesterol.
Your milk can there, Bob?
Yeah, milk pans, 2 milk pans.
Milk
can,
can,
yes,
can.
milk cans, which we take milk down, and David takes milk home in the evenings.
That's some bit over 100 years old.
Oh yes, that's 100 years old, that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the tinned fruit, the bottled fruit, jams, I think that's what my governor does in the springtime.
So nice, Victoria plums, every sort of jam, soon be busy again with strawberries and raspberries. We've got the modern deep freeze, of course, where we can keep the turkeys that we have at Christmas.
Okay. This is Brooklands, home of Irish Brand and son Paul.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Iris Brand. I married John Oliver Brand in 1939 at the age of 19 and came to live at Brook Hall. When I arrived there were a housekeeper, 2 maids, a cook and a gardener. We had no electricity. We had to use Aladdin lamps and candles. Our washing consists of a dolly tub in the old dairy. We had a mangle and a copper where we boiled all the white clothes. And our water we had to pump from a kitchen sink from a well. I came over to Brooklands in 1965. We designed this bungalow ourselves, and one of the features of it is in their eyebrow window. Unfortunately, I lost my husband 2 years ago, but I have 4 sons, 3 of whom are still farming. This is my son Paul, who lives with me. We are very keen gardeners. Paul does most of the vegetable, and I do all the flowers. The brook was just a hedge and ditch when we came in 1965, and we have gradually improved it over the years, putting in rock plants and roses. One of my hobbies in my younger days was tennis. I had a hard tennis court, but that didn't last long because unfortunately my husband developed Parkinson's disease, and he took a lot of care and attention in nursing him. But I still enjoy my garden, and so does Paul. I grow all my seeds, flower seeds. In the sun rounds, there's often 100 boxes there. I always remember the saying, you're nearer to God in a garden than anywhere else on earth.
This is number 1, Glebeside. Is the home of Chris and Jill Grout.
Hello, my name's Chris Grout. This is my daughter Nikki.
And I'm Jill Grout, and this is our other daughter Jessica, who's 5 months old.
We've lived here about 3 years. We moved up from Melford, where I've worked for about 10 years, doing organ building and cabinet making. And you?
I'm a teacher. Teaching only part-time at the moment in the village school. I did do nearly a year full-time, and then Jessica arrived. I hope to go back to full-time teaching, but not until she's a bit older. Probably, if there's more work in the village, I'll continue doing that. Otherwise, I'll probably have to go out of the area again. I was working in Colchester previously. Nikki goes to school in, playgroup at the moment in Long Melford, 2 mornings a week. But I expect she'll go to the village school if it's still open. Over to you again.
Over to me again. Right. Hobbies. We haven't got too many hobbies, I don't think. I'm a Morris dancer. I dance for a side at Bury St Edmunds. And we travel around the country doing the old-fashioned Morris dancing. Not that we've ever danced here, though.
Well, Cavendish is the nearest, is it?
Yeah, we danced at Cavendish, yeah. I like watching sport, but I don't play any, apart from darts and snooker. Like the odd pint.
Do with a pub in the village?
Yes, we could do with a pub in the village, please.
Well, I make brave attempts at keeping the garden going. It's a bit difficult with 2 young children and not a good lot of fine weather. Needlework. Read a lot when time permits. I enjoy... I've dried up.
So have I. Oh, stop it there a minute.
This is Mill Reef, home of Vera Brand. This is the old blacksmith shop, which was disused around the early 1950s. This is looking down the street from Mill Road.
Hello, I'm Vera Brand and have lived in Foxearth or Pentlow all my life. I was 8 years old when we moved from Bunting's Pentlow to Brook Hall in 1921 on the death of my grandmother, Julia Brand, who through early widowhood had been a farmer in her own right for several years under my father's, John Perkins Brand's, supervision. He had bought Brook Hall from her, and she had a huge staff, indoors and out, as she also owned 4 smaller farms: Bradfields, her own old family home, Easton Lodge, Easton Smiths and Hubbards. These had to be sold and were all bought by different farmers. Only Hubbards is still owned and farmed by the original purchasers, the Mason family. My mother, brother John Oliver Brand and I were not keen on the move. The main attraction was the bathroom my grandmother had recently had installed, but the only water supply to the house was from the brook, whence the farm itself gets its name. The water went under the garden into a well and was pumped into various tanks into the attics by a hand pump in the kitchen. Drinking water came from pumps over a spring in another part of the farm. The brook rises from a spring a mile or so away and flows through meadows under the Foxearth Liston Road and eventually into the River Stour. The cattle in the meadows trod down the banks and made little ponds for drinking, and in hot weather stand in them all day long. Consequently, the water was unfit for household use for large periods in the summer. In the mid-1920s, my father established a red poll herd, which was expanded and upgraded under Milk Marketing Board regulations until milk could be sold to a wholesaler. The first necessity was clean water, and a borehole 130 feet was sunk near the house, and water was pumped into the house and the dairy by an engine. My father was a member of the Shire Horse Society and once had 28 horses at Brook Hall alone. These were gradually reduced as tractors took over. He reluctantly sold his very labour-intensive flock of Suffolk sheep when their land fertility activities could be substituted partly by the use of artificial fertilisers. When I left school, I could have gone to London University, but my father wanted a secretary, and as the effect of the depression had not quite worn off, money was tight, and I yielded to pressure and did not avail myself of the place. This was a period of change and mechanisation, and there was a great deal of bureaucracy to contend with. We had not acquired main electricity when the war broke out. We had our own generator eventually, and by the beginning of the 1930s, By the beginning of the 1939, Hitler's intentions were obvious to all, and among measures taken was the formation of the Auxiliary Territorial Service. In January, I signed on for clerical work, and I was thus the first recruit to volunteer in the 1st Essex Company at Colchester. The first task was to fill in forms for the other volunteers. We had weekly parades and attended lectures in various barracks. In May, my mother became very ill with inoperable cancer. I informed my company commander, Mrs. Sterling, and she advised me not to resign. She would excuse me parades and camp and await events. 10 days before the outbreak of war, my mother died. A severe but unexpected blow, particularly to my father. I informed the company commander, who was very sympathetic, and advised me to apply for discharge on compassionate grounds and to ignore my calling up, which she would deal with. I even received a week's pay before my discharge went through. It was the worst fortnight of my life. The opportunity to rejoin the ATS, as promised, never occurred. I remember listening to Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister, announce that we were at war with Germany while I was making beds for evacuees. A mother and her 2 children from North London arrived the same day, expressing surprise at all that country and shock when they looked for their light switches and found they had to use candles. When the fine weather gave way to autumn and London had not been raided, they went back. We did not suffer badly from hostilities, and considering East Anglia was peppered with aerodromes, incendiary bombs were scattered, and that was about all, over fields sometimes. The worst incident was one March afternoon, probably in 1942, when a Mosquito plane hit the top of a tree and crashed onto a field the other side of the coach road. The pilot, a flight lieutenant, and the other airmen were killed instantly. The parents of the other young airmen who lived near Weymouth wrote and asked for details. There was little we could tell them, but sometime later they visited us and we showed them the place. In 1945, my father handed his estate of just over 800 acres to my brother and me. he was in failing health and died in March 1947. In 1956, a company, J.O. Brand & Sons, was formed, this being the normal practice to ensure continuity. My nephews were growing up, and their future could thus be ensured. Since then, various farms and parts of farms that have come on the market have been purchased, and the estate has grown to 2.5 times its original acreage. In 1964, I moved back to Buntings, Pentler, my birthplace, and was there for 5 years, when my eldest nephew and his wife and 2-year-old son, Clive, moved in. Their second son was born there the next year. I took up residence in a caravan, a mobile home, for 6 months, while a house for me was being built. I was there for 2 years and quite enjoyed the experience. In April 1971, building on my house began. The small farm my brother originally rented and then bought from C.J. ERO Sons was incorporated into the estate, and the buildings, being obsolete, were demolished. A barn on the side of Mill Road provided the bricks and slates, and the upstairs floors were made of planks taken from an old granary. I partly designed the house, a pavilion type, no longer fashionable, but I liked the outdoor character of it. This is the site of the horse yard. This was the barn wall, and it was very close to the road and most inconvenient. The bricks were very good, and there were just enough of them to build the house, and also enough of the slates. All this was stables and a coach house. The dents on the ground show where the horses stamped their feet in the bricks.
This is the back entrance to the brewery.
Right, the June meeting of Foxearth in District WI was held at the village hall on the 13th with Mrs. James as the chair. There were 15 members present. Mrs. Allen acted as secretary in the absence of Mrs. Spender. Minutes of the previous meeting were approved and signed. An invitation was received for 3 members to attend Ron Milford's 70th birthday party. Mrs. James, Mrs. Hodder and Mrs. Allen will go. A new member, Mrs. Richardson, was admitted. Mrs. Leach, the Glenford member who had attended the Albert Hall meeting on our behalf, read a full account of the proceedings and assured us she had very much enjoyed the experience. Members were asked to consider changing the date of the next meeting, as our speaker would otherwise be forced to cancel. It was agreed, therefore, that we will meet on July the 18th instead of the 11th. The chairman called for ideas for speeches for next year, and after a while, several very interesting ideas came forward. There is still time for more, and these will be considered by the committee. Everyone agreed we keep to the second Monday for our meetings. Our speaker, Mrs. French-Owen, was then introduced, who spoke on foot care. Mrs. Carlo volunteered to model, and we were given some very good advice on caring for our feet. Mrs. Owen has a lively and charming manner, and her talk was most enjoyable. Mrs. Carter expressed thanks. The raffle was won by Mrs. James. Hostesses for refreshments were Mrs. Finch and Mrs. Starr. Unfortunately, neither could be present, so Mrs. Bear and Mrs. Chapman kindly made the tea and served the meal.
You always have fun in it. I think rising from the minutes, well, Mrs. Hodder and I went to the meeting at Ronald. It was most enjoyable, so did the birthday party. We had a lovely time, didn't we, Mrs. Hodder? Oh, yes. With lovely refreshments, and we came home feeling very full.
Yes, food.
And the other thing is, Mrs. Allen was hoping we could perhaps think of some more ideas for speakers. Shall I read through the ones we've got down here? And we've got Potato or Meat Marketing Board, Hints on Hair Care, Edith Freeman on the History of Sudbury, the National Trust with slides, a travel book with slides, Wildflowers with slides, the Citizens Advice Bureau, Macmillan Nurses, the Key Theatre, report or a visit, some aspect of art with slides, say Gainsborough House, buttons and tassels, coat needlework, Sweet Silk, which we still haven't found the address for, no.
I know, there's still a book, I know it.
And Christmas decorations or crackers, which we put down so far for October. Has anybody got any other ideas that they'd like? So that we've got a choice if some people can't come. No?
I think I did have that, a bag of flowers in, didn't we?
Oh, right, that's a good idea. We wanted that, didn't we?
What to do with a bag of flowers? What to do with a three-pound bag of flowers?
Does John Stevenson do talks on life lasting?
He might well do one.
We asked him.
If not, there is one in the book. But it'd be nice for Right, so we're all right for hostesses next month.
Yes.
Right.
But ladies, can I introduce our speaker, please? It's been a good job. He's speaking to us on medieval ways. We all know her anyway, she's an expert. But we'll let her.
Well, I must apologise because I'm not actually talking about medieval ways at all. When I started to think about it, I couldn't think of a logical way in at all. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about the history of clothes and how styles and fashions developed, and brought along some things that I've made. I must apologise in advance for some of them because there aren't any books telling you how to make historical costumes, so you learn as you go along. And the things that I made first of all, I'm now heartily ashamed of, and I couldn't really hold my head up in regard to them. And so I have to forgive the things that aren't particularly well made because they're the ones that I made earlier, and I got better as I've gone on, but I'm not particularly good. I thought I'd start off by actually getting dressed. What everybody in historical times, before Victorian times, wore underneath everything else was a shift. They used to wear it because it kept them clean. It was only to take off and wash, and because washing was so difficult, they wouldn't actually have their sort of top clothes washed that frequently. So they'd always have a shift next to the string you could take off and wash. And I think that's where the term shiftless comes from. That someone who was poor and dirty wouldn't bother to have a shift and wouldn't bother to wash it very often. And so everybody would have worn one of these next to their skin. And the clothes I'm going to put on date from the 1640s. So the next thing I put on is this, which is my bumble. A nice little thing. You might think I've got a large enough bum already. And I hate to tell you, it's in the wrong place for the fashion of the time. It has to be sort of nicely up there, so I sort of tie that on. Just with the pad to give me the right shape behind. Then I'm going to put my petticoat on. I'm only putting on one petticoat, but 2 or 3 or even 4 women worn. It's a very simple petticoat with a drawstring that goes all the way around you. Sits on top of your bum roll at the back, so you get a nice little sort of shelf, which will do the shape of your aim for. And then you've got to go and tighten up all your drawstringy bits, which of course turns all in a knot.
Do you want some colour?
No, it's all right. I'll just do that one. And the idea was that you had sort of a bit of a flat bit at the front, slightly, and more of a display on the sides. It's not going to work, I'll sit it onto the bum. So that's your next layer on top. Your next layer will be your actual top skirt, which will go over the top of the petticoat.
That's really quite warm.
It is a little bit. You equalise. You reach a sort of temperature of about the thigh, some thigh on somebody's thigh. You never actually get above that point. The thing I haven't done is I haven't put on my stockings or my garters or my shoes. I just couldn't face doing that bit as well. So I've stopped at the hip of the skirts.
You don't need any knickers with all that on.
You don't actually wear knickers at all. And if you do, it's very uncomfortable. And then, of course, you see, this is where you get these wonderful puffed up, ruched up skirts. If you had, this is a working costume, but if you had a very fancy costume, you wouldn't want that to get dirty. So you pinch that in. And that would give you your nice pretty underskirt that you often see in front. They actually get the top part, they have the bodice, which goes on. And this one's constructed actually in 4 parts. So I've got all laced together ready to make it easier. It's got sleeves which come loose. The actual bodice itself. And this part, which is the stomacher, which you lace across here. Now, as you can imagine, doing this every morning would possibly take you quite a while. And I suspect, quite strongly, that an awful lot of people didn't actually get that much undressed that often. I think they just kind of wore all the time because it was quite a lot of hassle and faffling around. I sort of meant to start off at this point, but we were all moving with furniture before we started. I didn't have time to put it on. I was going to sort of hit you with my full glory without having to dress in front of you. But then Mr. Richardson suggested that you might be interested to see how it all went together. And so I thought I'd dress while we're here. So you just carry on lacing yourself in. And it's, as a general rule, whatever the period of the costume, you can tell how high up socially you are, because this costume is working class and I can dress myself in it. If you have a upper class costume, it usually is designed in such a way that you cannot physically get yourself into it, which proves that you've got to have service to be able to wear it. So it's a kind of rather like having a very, very expensive car or something. You're demonstrating the fact that you're incredibly wealthy because you have to have a servant who helps you to dress. And I have had friends who've done the event at Kentwell Hall and have made completely accurate upper class costumes, and they've found that it can take, they can need at least 3 people to actually get you into it. At this point, I'm sort of 2/3 of the way there. The thing, of course, I haven't got rid of my hair, which is absolutely essential. No respectable woman from the earliest medieval times through until quite recently ever went out with her hair uncovered. You could get away with it for 3 reasons. If you were about under marriageable age, you didn't need to cover your hair. If you were a queen or a saint in a portrait, you didn't need to cover your hair. And if you were advertising the fact that you were a lady of easy virtue and were looking for work, you didn't cover your hair. And there must have been some very sort of shocked saints around, I suspect, who got it wrong. Anyway, so that's about it. And at this point, you're ready for the off, and you can start doing all the things that you would normally do, all that heavy housework and dusting and hard work for your kids. On occasions when I've worn this for a long time, I have actually found my waist diminishes by a considerable amount because the sheer weight of pulling the skirt around with you actually is very good exercise. So if any of you ladies wish to do with an inch or 2 off from middles, I can suggest that you put this lot on and then do the housework, particularly if you switch the hoover off and do it all with a heavy brush or something. This would be absolutely ideal. Anyway, I'm going to take that off because it's difficult to talk with it on. It's not real thing on. So how did all of this lot develop? This is sort of 17th century costume. Well, it all started off much more simply. Something like this. This is a dress that I've made, which is based on one that was found in an Icelandic peat bog and was done at about 1340. It's very, very simply constructed with lots and lots of small panels down the side here, which are called bottle top gauze. Makes it look very, very fancy. But in actual fact, it's very economical to make, and the reason that they made them that way is because of the loom widths. They didn't have very wide looms, and so they had to go and cut the dresses out of a tight waistband there, with yards and yards and yards of material in them. And they're using the fact that there's lots of material in it to demonstrate how wealthy they are. But the peasants, of course, were having to cut their pieces to fit them round them, to make them fit well. And suddenly somebody must have one day looked at the peasants and thought, my hands look better than I do, because they're actually fitting quite nicely. And so they started to actually take in material and cut material out and shape much more. So from a sort of peasant, or this is actually sort of middle class dress really, you start to get shaping. But they still haven't got sleeves entirely right. And this one, if you put it on, I don't think it's anybody who sort of feels brave enough, you can see it's got a little bunch of material under the armpit, because they haven't actually worked out how to cut a sleeve with a head on it yet. They just put a sleeve square on, and all the surface material gets shoved up under the arm in a kind of wrinkled mass. The sort of effect you get when you're learning how to dress in it quite often. It's wonderful people who aren't very good at sewing like me, because you can sort of achieve it and say it's like a truly medieval effect. The other thing that's quite interesting about that particular dress is that it's got detached sleeves. Learned about it. They even used to pass laws saying, you know, how much money you could earn in a year. If you earned more than a certain amount of money, then you weren't allowed to have velvet. If you had a certain thing, you had wool. If you were a bit richer, you could have velvet. If you were very, very rich, you could have fur as your decoration on your gowns. But it was all determined by what rank in society you were, because they were very keen that they should keep the social gradations. And even things like, you know, how long the points on your shoes could be, or how long your sleeves could be, they actually used to legislate. I suspect that this means that people weren't obeying it, because you don't go to pass laws against things that people aren't doing, because it's not like start driving. If nobody drove, then nobody bothered to pass some laws about it. So obviously people were dressing up as much as they could. Well, that's a bit more understanding and boring for you. The next bit's the fun part, we all learn to dress up. What I need now is a willing volunteer who is prepared to the things that I brought in belong to my mother, and she's quite an ample lady, so I don't think we'll have any problems with actually fitting anybody. So I just need somebody who's prepared to be a bit long. I knew I could rely on someone going forward. She's also a bit taller, so this could be very nice. I'll sit down. Going to be able to see are actually quite impressive. The bits that you aren't able to see aren't at all, and that's historically accurate. What's not historically accurate which, as you can see, you actually need somebody to get you into and push your sleeves up and generally sort around with. This one's Queen Mary. Queen Mary I of England. And it's known as the... So as I say, that's sort of about 1550s style of dress. I'm moving that. Yes, oh yes, particularly one who's not on the head. So that's sort of a 1520 style. You can sit yourself down for a moment. Oh, that's staying in it. Yes, you can stay in it, because I like sort of lying all up so you can see everything clearly.
This is Weston Hall, home of the Flux family. This farm was called Weststones in 1045.
Lutz. I'm 47 years old and I live at Western Hall, Foxearth. This is my wife Claire, Andrew, Emma and Graham. I come from a farming family based in Sussex, Surrey, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I was born in Ipswich and then the family moved down to Sussex where I did my schooling. My father bought a farm in Longmouth in 1960 and we all moved up here.
That's it.
No. In 1971 I moved to Western Hall. Western Hall was built in about 1500, an old thatched house, and since then it's been modernised and added on to it over the years. I'm now looking after 3 farms. Western Hall Farm, which is 390 acres, belongs to the New England Company, and I pay rent every year to the New England Company. I also look after my father's farm at Longmouth, and I've just taken on some more land at Glamsford contract farming, in all making just over 1,000 acres. The farm is mainly all arable. I'm not interested in livestock. Hobbies, I'm interested in motorsport, windsurfing. I can't manage windsurfing, but I'm trying. I've been trying a long time. Oh, I do a bit of skiing in the winter if I get time.
How many men do you employ, Carl?
Oh yes, righto, yes. On the I'm going back to the farm with 1,000 acres. I've got 1 man here and 1 man at Longmouth. And I have some harvest help, family or whoever I can get. Andrew's helping with this harvest, aren't you, Andrew? Yes. Graham, he hasn't helped with 2 harvests, he's been away. No, you helped last harvest.
I helped last harvest.
Yeah. And I've been trying to get Emma to learn to drive a tractor. Were you going to learn to drive, Emma?
No.
Aren't you? Oh.
No.
Claire, I've been trying to get Claire to drive a tractor, but she hasn't volunteered
I seem to be the odd job man. I'm just jumping in the van to do just that and something else.
Get the camera. Right. I think I've said what I'm going to say. This is Claire. Claire's going to make a speech now.
I was born in 1944 and moved here with my parents in 1947. My father, Mr. Robert Pinney, farmed here until 1971. When Colin and I moved, my father retired to Cavendish and Colin took the tenancy of the farm. Graham and Andrew were born at Great Woldingfield, but Emma was born at Western Hall. I try to maintain my vegetable garden and cook these vegetables keep us going through the year. And my hobbies are tennis and playing bridge. I like to get out and show some interest on the farm, but it's getting a little bit too, complicated for me now. Graham is the eldest, and are you going to say what you're doing now?
Okay, I'll say. I'm just finished the first year at Shuttleworth College doing an extra diploma course.
In agriculture?
In agriculture. And then I'm just going out to work on a farm, Robert Harvey's at Tannington near Ipswich. And for the next year living in a caravan. My hobbies are windsurfing, tennis, squash, anything, sports.
Great basketball player.
A great basketball player by my height.
What size are your shoes?
I don't think I've got anything else to say.
Skiing?
Well, skiing, yes, I enjoy skiing a lot. Andrew?
Yeah. I've just done my first year of A-levels at Woodbury School. This harvest I'm working for my father on the farm, and hopefully after my A-levels I want to do a degree in agriculture at university or go to agricultural college. I enjoy cycling. I've just been on a 3-week cycling holiday in France. I enjoy skiing and playing tennis and squash and that sort of thing.
You're learning to drive?
I'm learning to drive at the moment. I've got my test on August 16th, 17th, sorry. And that's just about all, really. Emma?
I'm 13 and I used to go to school at Sudbury. Now I'm going to school at Woodbridge. I'm a boarder there, and my hobbies are cooking, windsurfing, tennis and squash, and skiing.
And that's about all, is it?
Yes, that's all really.
You're not old enough to do too much, are you?
No.
No.
This is Foxearth Hall, home of the Campbell Lambert family.
My name is John Campbell Lambert, and my family have lived in this area for many years. We used to live at Liston Hall, and the family lived there until about 1850, from whence they moved to Foxearth Hall. My family lived at Foxearth Hall from 1900 till about 1953, when we moved to Shropshire. And in 1975 we returned here and lived at Foxearth Hall since 1983.
Oh no.
I would like to introduce my children, Caroline on the left and Nicholas on my right.
I'm Caroline and I go to Tudor Hall School, Banbury.
I'm Nicholas and I go to Radley College, Oxford.
This is the postman. Morning.
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. You're going to say a few words?
Yes, well, my name's Arthur. I'm one of 3 postmen that come up here. Altogether, we got a total of, 44 miles run round with just over 300 calls. Start work 4 o'clock in the morning. Very nice getting up at 3:15, but that's the job. And, been a postman now for nearly 32 years. 13 of it I was in a head office in London before I came down here. And I've definitely got no regrets. Very happy to be here. I'll do a night shift out of the 3. Otherwise it started work 2 weeks at 4 o'clock in the morning and 1 at 11 o'clock at night. How's that?
This is a look at Foxearth during the summer month. The bus. Days a week, 4 journeys a week, twice on Saturdays, once on Tuesday and once on Thursday. Bill Amos from Belsham, the bus belongs to. Waits farmhouse, Belsham Water. This is a Tiger Bot, 1939. Richard Tevison, the owner and pilot. This is the site of a new development, Mill Road. Formerly the old brewery dump, bottle dump and sewer. This is the footings for a third house. This is the site of a new house in the grounds of the old brewery house. These are the conversions of the old brewery offices to flats. This is West End Cottage, home of Keith and Mary Tilley.
Hello there. My name's Keith and this is my wife Mary Tilley. We've been living here for how long? 18 years. We've had two daughters who have both married and moved on. My youngest one has two children, so we've got two grandchildren, grandsons actually, doing well. I work at National Rubber Company, which is in Sudbury, Bullingdon. We make gaskets and I'm in charge of the quality. And my wife has her own business as a dressmaker and she works up at Acton. She's got a premises there. And I'm pleased to say it's doing very well. We have hobbies. Luckily we're both the same. We're both interested in knitting and the associated things. And I have also collected very old knitting machines, which I hope to one day open a small museum and write a small book on it. We enjoy living here. We moved up from London many years ago, and I can honestly say I don't think we'd go back there if I could name my own price. Would you? No. So anyway, I think that's about all we have to say. The only thing I would say, I think this is a marvellous thing that's been happening, and I think it's one thing that's other villages should do. Anyway, okay then.
This is Weston Cottage, home of John, Kathleen and Vincent Laws.
My name's John Laws, and this is my wife Kathleen and my son Vincent. Vincent who is handicapped and goes to the local centre in Sudbury, and we've been here 4 years approximately now. We originally came from Ealing in West London and decided to move out into Buckinghamshire, which seems to me to getting away from the traffic and the hustle bustle. And then the M25 forced us to move even further into the countryside, and hence we arrived here in North Essex.
We've never regretted.
No, we've never regretted one bit.
It's a lovely place to live. John works locally.
I work locally as a butcher. I was fortunate enough to find a job here with a local firm, which I also enjoy. In fact, the best job I've had. I find country people more than acceptable.
Made a lot of friends.
Yes, a lot of friends. Yes. And we help with the local church things. We've recently helped clean up the church, although we're not avid church goers.
Having it repaired, which was very nice.
Yes, the church is absolutely magnificent, which is all part of our heritage, and we thoroughly enjoy it. There isn't anything we can say badly about it.
We've never lived anywhere, but we've been happier.
No.
It's a lovely environment. I work locally. I look after the telephone kiosks in the area. This is Telecom. We've managed to get quite a few of the old red ones painted up and looking very smart, especially the one in Foxearth. And I also give holidays for handicapped people from Menka, which we enjoy very much. We do an exchange thing with other countries sometimes. We've had German handicapped people staying as well, which has been great fun. And our handicapped go and stay in Germany, which has been most successful. There isn't a lot more to say, we just enjoy our lives here.
Except that our property, as you probably noticed, is thatched, and it's of Norfolk reed, which is longest lasting of all the materials used for thatching. And we've just had it recently re-roofed. That's the decorative part on the top. And the building is 17th, 16th, 17th century. It's had quite a few improvements done on it. But a typical English home. And I hope we're a typical English family.
Let's say something, Lucy. You like living here?
Yeah. And what have we been to see today that we hope to get? A dog. Springer Spaniel. Springer Black Spaniel.
We hope our dog, which is a German Shepherd dog, Carla, come and say hello. Carla, come and say hello. Come on. We hope our German Shepherd dog will settle down with a Springer Spaniel in a couple of weeks' time. We get a lot of enjoyment from taking our dogs for walks in the area. There are lots of lovely walks. And we enjoy it as much as the dogs walking.
And we hope the Stour Valley, this mid-Stour Valley, will remain as beautiful as it is now. Absolutely magnificent.
We get a lot of winds, but
it used to be used.
It's a small
As
price
we're
to
on a
pay.
hill.
Yeah.
Small price to pay. But anyway, I quite enjoy the wind. Keeps you cool on a hot day.
It's always fresh.
We feel very healthy. What about you?
Hastie driving this one. Tom Brandy Owen. This is Western Hall, Foxearth. Combine driver is Ralph Woodhouse. The tractor driver is Andrew Flux. This is Lint Growers, home with Bill and Sandra Martin.
My name's Bill Martin and this is my wife Sandra. We have been living at Lint Growers for something like 12 years now. Previously we had lived in London, and I suppose the main reason we moved to Foxearth is that we wanted to live in a beautiful part of the country, which we certainly have done. The house we live in, Lint Growers, was originally 3 farmers' cottages attached to Huntsman's farm just down the road. In about 1960-63 it was converted from those 3 thatched cottages into the house it is now. It's believed to have been built in the early 16th century, so we say perhaps something like 1540 or earlier. And we're very happily living here. Not only do we live here, but we also work from here. And Sandra will now talk a little bit about the work we do.
Well, we work from home, as Bill says. We work together. We study what's going on in leisure, what people do in their free time, how they spend their spare money, and what new developments are being created, like theme parks or new swimming pools or whatever, that people can use in their leisure time. What we do particularly is to study what's happened in the past, what's happening now, and then try to look in the future and see what is going to be happening in leisure terms, what we're all going to be doing with our free time in 10 years, maybe even in 20 years' time. It's an interesting occupation. It's very provocative. We spend a lot of our time sort of looking at how people are behaving and how they spend their free time and trying to think, well, is it going to be the same in the future?
Travel?
We travel a lot for our free time and for our work. We go over to the United States quite often, once every 1 or 2 years if we can, in order to see what's happening there. We go to Europe quite a lot. We go to Europe not only for work purposes. We're very involved with the Sudbury Town Twinning Association, and so we've been on quite a number of visits to the twin towns, Höxter in Germany and also Clermont in France. Our other free time activities ourselves, our hobbies if you like, we spend a lot of time on the garden. We've got about 2/3 of an acre here, and it takes up quite a lot of time just keeping it faintly under control. Bill occupies himself particularly with the vegetables, and I a little more with the garden, but with the flower garden, but we do both to some degree. Our other particular interest is listening to music. We go a lot to the opera, if we can, both roundabout in Bury and Ipswich and also in London from time to time. We listen to records a lot, and we have one particular musical interest, which is rather unusual. That is, we play Javanese gamelan music. Java is an island in Indonesia, and it has a special kind of music, particularly percussion music. And we got hooked on this from listening to records, and we've been now to Java and to other parts of Indonesia, and we go once a week in term time to Cambridge to play with a gamelan group there. We also have a few gamelan instruments here. Gamelan is the word for the whole orchestra, and we have just a few of the instruments here, but if you like we can let you see them and hear what they sound like.
So why don't we go inside now, Tom, and you can see it yourself. These are just 2 of the instruments from a Javanese gamelan. We bought them in Yogyakarta last year. In fact, they were handmade specially for us, and they actually, you see, they've got beautiful handicraft on them. And this one is called a slenten, and this one is called a gendare. And I will just play a little melody from one typical Javanese piece. That's just half a melody. Now Sandra will play the same piece, but to show the variation that the instrument provides.
Yeah, so this instrument, the gandar, is one of the elaborating instruments in the Javanese gamelan. That is, it takes the basic tune that you hear there and it plays sort of patterns round it to make the whole thing sound more interesting. And I'll just play you a little bit.
So, the sound of the gamelan across the fields of Foxearth.
This is a BBC television film which has been shot in the old brewery site. Called Campion, which is due to be screened next year.
Can I turn this slightly?
And it's not too square on. Come away from the wall just a touch. That's it. Maybe the chin down just a touch.
Good in front of cameras. Hi. Very nice to be in your village. Find her car, maybe she's gone to get something to me.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Young, location manager with the BBC series called Campion, and we're behind the old brewery in Foxearth, filming a sequence for the new series which is due to be transmitted in February. This sequence is a police station. We've dressed the old brewery to look like a police station, and we've got 4 days filming here with Peter Davison starring, Brian the Glover as his sort of valet. And this is the centre of the intrigue at the police station, where he's an amateur detective and he's liaising with the police trying to solve a crime. And so there are some pretty important scenes in the police station here. What you see behind me is the unit's catering and costume and makeup vehicles. The unit itself is just around the corner. The series is due to be transmitted in February. This story is called The Case of the Late Pig, and it's in 2 parts. And it's part of an 8-part series that runs from mid-January until mid-March.
My name is Lindsay Smith. I'm the local police officer. I work for Essex Police and I'm stationed at Belsham St Paul. I cover some 7 villages, local villages, of which Foxearth is one. I've been stationed at Belsham St Paul now for some 22 years, and throughout that time I have looked after and worked within Foxearth village. I shall continue now until I retire in March next year, 1989. How about that? Would be all right?
Oh, I'm Dylan Pym and I'm playing the part of a shepherd rolling past the police station with a flock of 30 ewes. I don't really know if that's a flock, but it's some sheep anyway, and hopefully it'll work fairly well. I don't know whether it's going to work with the car going through, but I think the film crew seem to have it together.
Ploughing at Weston Hall. Frank Head is the tractor driver. It's combining at Hubbard's Farm. The driver is Bernard Mason. Bernard served for 6 years in the army during the war in the Cambridgeshire Regiment. He lost a leg and was captured at Singapore and was prisoner of war with the Japanese for 4 years. This is Old Oak Cottage, home of the Gillam family.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Gillam and I live here with my family at Old Oak Cottage, and on my left is Diana, my wife, and Jane, my daughter, and Luke, my son.
Hi.
Hello. How old are you?
We moved here in 1975 when Jane and Luke were a great deal smaller than they are now, and we have been very happy here now for 13 years. Diana will tell you a bit about the house now.
Actually, we know very little about the house. It was never a grand house. It was obviously just a cottage, but it's a very old cottage. And one of our great prides is our old oak tree, which is the cottage is named after Old Oak Cottage. And people who owned the house before us had someone from Kew up here who said it might be 600 years old. And the tree surgeon who came to help us with the trees on the property said that it probably, the house had certainly been here, or a house had been here as long as the tree, because otherwise it would have been cut down or branches taken off for firewood, pollard. And we'll go later and have a look at it. But the thing that we like most about Old Oak Cottage is our garden. And we come and work very hard at it all the time, and it's quite lovely. Yep. Jamie?
Yeah, the rest of the time we live in London, and Luke and I both go to Westminster School. I've just finished Westminster, and in October I'm moving up to Oxford, moving to Magdalen College, Oxford.
To read?
To read history.
Well, I've been coming here since I was 2, and I go to Westminster School in London, which is the same school as my sister used to go to. And I'm just about to take my GCSEs.
I think you might say, Lukey, that how much you've learned about the countryside, like from coming to the cottage weekend after weekend over all that period. I think probably you're one of the boys at school who knows most about the countryside.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, when he was little, he could tell the teacher all the names of the trees. She was always very impressed.
Di's reminded me that I haven't said what I do. I'm a managing director of British Petroleum, the big oil company, and another attraction of this house is that it's so quiet and so relaxed away from the hustle and bustle of working in the City of London.
Mr. Hastie, do you want us to say any more? This is the old oak tree which we're so proud of. It's actually hollow inside, and we've had it wired up. But it's growing very well. When we first came, we cut a lot of dead branches off, but it's growing so fast, in fact, we think perhaps it'll get too heavy in time. But after the hurricane, it had a very good haircut. We lost quite a number of fortunately not big branches, just small branches. And so it looks a little bit smaller this year than last year.
Combining wheat at Red House Farm. The combine driver is Bob Jackson. Tractor driver is David Jackson. This is number 11, Claypits Road, home of Gerald and Doris Sanford.
I'm Doris Sanford, born in Foxearth just after the First World War. Went to village school until I was 14 years of age. Worked as a cook in nearby Sudbury until I married Gerald. Came back to Foxearth and have lived there ever since. After almost 50 years of marriage, quite a few changes have taken place. During the war, I was temporary postwoman for a time. I've always helped in the village where I could, with functions, church fetes, etc. As a very young girl, I can remember the brewery. It was a lovely smell when they brewed the beer. Also the tall chimney, which was a landmark. All gone now. So, you Gerald.
Oh. I'm Gerald Sanford, born in Sudbury. I moved over to Foxearth, married Doris, got called up in the Marines, served in Iceland, Italy, India, Borneo, and returned
1946,
in 1946, and worked for a builder in Sudbury 39 years, and now I'm retired. Live happily ever after.
This is the old schoolhouse, home of Philip and Corinne Cox.
I'm Phil Cox. We've lived in the schoolhouse for 4.5 years. We came to Foxearth from a place called South Ockenden in South Essex. I'm a teacher. I'm head of physical education at a large comprehensive school in Rainham. Since we've come to Foxearth, we've become very involved in
village life. I'm at present clerk for the parish council. I also am one of the church clock winders. I do it once a week. I'm a keen cricketer, and I'm at present captain of Long Melford Cricket Club First 11. At the moment we're having an excellent season and hopefully going to get promotion from our present division.
Yes, well, I'm Corinne Cox. As Phil said, we came here in January of 1984. We had no electricity, no water, and it began to snow. The house had been uninhabited for many years, so it was in a bit of a state, as you can imagine. So it's taken us a long time to try and sort it out and get things in nice order. I started teaching in the village school next door in September 1985. I took over from the infant teacher who took early retirement. Then in April 1986 I became the acting head teacher, and April 1988 the permanent head teacher of the village school. I'm a member of the parish council. I'm also a member of the PCC. We go to the local parish church, St Peter and St Paul in Foxearth, quite regularly. We don't have a very big congregation at the moment, but there are a few stalwarts who turn out every week. I'm also a student, postgrad student, at Birkbeck College, London University, and I'm drawing to the conclusion now of my long mammoth task in editing an East Anglian medieval dramatic text, and hopefully that'll be finished within the next 12 months.
We're pleased that we made the move to Foxearth. As Corinne said, it was a bit of a traumatic beginning, but things have settled down since then, and we're very happy here. We enjoy the country life, although my life is a bit of a contrast because I work in an urban area. It's certainly pleasant to come back to these beautiful surroundings every evening, and obviously we enjoy the weekends at home.
This, by the way, is one of our two pets at the moment. This is Callie, ignoring the camera. And we've also got a little cat who's extremely shy, terrible scaredy cat, so you won't possibly see him, a little ginger Tom.
This is the ploughing tractor, Brook Hall. This is John Gardner, who delivers the newspapers 5 days a week. John lives at the old camp, the old prisoner of war camp, Orley. Planting trees on the Foxearth Sudbury Road.
Ready? We've got an oak there, haven't we? On a piece of birch you can put.
This is Foxearth House, home of the Douglas Hughes family.
Oh, shut your mouth. Professional.
My name's Roger Douglas Hughes. I live at Foxearth House and I'm a solicitor, and this is my family. My wife Monica and my daughters Sarah, Claire and Charlotte. Now then.
My name's Sarah and I used to go to school in Leicestershire at Uppingham, which is boarding school. But I've just finished.
I do go to school in Uppingham. I've just started that.
What's your name?
Emma. My name's Charlotte. I'm Clara and I go to Newhall in Chelmsford.
Alright, is there any other information you want of us? We moved into Foxearth House in 1966. It was formerly a rectory and built in about 1710. The last rector moved out in 1963 and the house was restored shortly afterwards and has been a continuous job ever since. Other than that, I'm keen on racing cars and I own a GT40 which was in Le Mans in 1965. I also have a Ferrari. Yes, it does.
Go on, Mum.
What?
For you.
You're on.
I'm on. I was born in Switzerland. And...
When did you come
When
here?
did you come here?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember.
1963, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But you're an official British person now.
I'm an official British person.
Right, what else other hobbies do you have?
I enjoy art.
Driving my motor car.
Yes, I enjoy driving other people's motor cars around the place. Because I just passed my driving test.
And it's very convenient. Very convenient.
And also we've got a dark room set up in the roof to do photography with.
Boris?
You got any?
No. Bring your cat in.
Yeah. Oh yes, I think we should have a cat here.
Am I going to get the cat? No.
No. I think the cat would enjoy that.
I don't think the cat would enjoy that very much, no.
Nice box night on the cricket meadow. Henry Roos, the butcher.
Morning, Gordon.
Morning, Henry.
A bit foggy this morning.
It is foggy, isn't it?
I'll take us in the house.
All right.
Hello, I'm Henry Roos and I'm the butcher from Long Melford. I've just been to Gordon Hastie's and delivered him some meat for his deep freeze. We've been coming to Foxearth from Long Melford since just after the First World War, the early 1920s, when we used to deliver to old Mr. David Ward and to Mr. Brand, amongst others. And in those days, of course, we used to come by horse and cart. We used to have our own horse and cart for delivering meat to Foxearth and other local villages. And from then we graduated to a very early Ford van. I can still remember the number of it because this old van was still going when I was a small boy in the early 1950s. I can remember the number GV4747. And I can remember coming round here with my father and a man we employed called Mr. Harry Boreham, delivering the meat when I was a small boy. But of course now we've progressed a bit from then. We've got a few more modern vans. We've got 3 vans on the road now, and we go to a lot more villages, Waldingfield, Alpheaton, even into Sudbury now. We've got 4 full-time butchers that we employ, and a sausage maker who comes in 4 days a week. Plus we have 2 part-time cashiers in our office in the shop, and a part-time lady who goes out on the rounds. We're rather unusual in so much as we still slaughter our own animals in the small slaughterhouse at the back of our shop. I think we're one of the few butchers left now who've got this facility of a slaughterhouse at the back of our shop. I think there's only about 4 left in the whole of Suffolk now, and we've always slaughtered our own ever since we were established in 1860. We're finding increasingly over the years now that the slaughtering facility is a great asset because we kill a lot of pigs and cattle for farmers and people who like to keep a pig in their backyard, and so you'd be surprised there's still people who do this, and we cut it up to their requirements and make sausages of it. We're also finding that we are selling a lot more convenience foods than we used to. We make our own pork cheese, our own sausages, cook our own hams, Scotch eggs, make our own pâté, and this is becoming an increasing part of our business. Well, I think that's all I have to say now, Gordon. Thank you very much.
Right, Henry.
Good morning and welcome to Foxearth House. This morning, on a rather foggy morning, we have gathered together all the classic cars with owners who live in the village.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Sycamore. This is my father's Rover 95. It was built in 1963.
My name's Michael Chinnery. This is the Triumph TR6, 2.5 litre fuel injection. The year of manufacture was 1974, and it's 125 horsepower.
Hello, my name is Jack Mason.
This is a 1961 Ford Consul.
I'm Clive Bassett from Oakley's Cottage in Foxearth. This is my pride and joy. She's a 1973 MGB GT. I've had her for approximately 9 years. Totally rebuilt the engine and renovated the bodywork. I hope to plan to have her resprayed probably the end of this year, early 1989. She's a 1798cc engine with twin SUs. Very, very heavy. She got curbside weight of approximately 1 tonne. Thoroughly enjoy her, and I can't see me ever getting rid of her.
Hello, my name's Jean Wade. This is my car, Henry. He's a German Carman Beetle convertible, which I brought back from Germany with me. It's my only car, and it gets used every day. That's it.
Right. This is a Morgan Plus 8. We've owned it from new, which is 10 years old now. It's done 75,000 miles, and no major work necessary on it yet. It's getting to a point where it needs a bit of a respray, a few stone chips and that flying through the Essex lanes and Suffolk lanes. Morgans are still made in the traditional style with steel chassis and wooden framework covered with either aluminium or steel panels. At one time it was virtually the quickest car on the road up to 60. Now with some of the modern supercharged things, they give it a run for its money now, but still a very popular car with the enthusiast. It gives classical motoring with at a reasonable price without having to get a car of the 1920s or anything. We've also got a 3-wheeler which unfortunately we're unable to get out today, but that's red as well, which complements the stable. That's in need of a full restoration. My co-pilot here, he's going to drive soon. But that's roughly about it. Run out of.
Okay, I'm Stuart Ham. This is a Lotus 7 Series 3, built in 1970. I restored it between 80 and 84. It's got a 1600 engine. This is one of only 350 that were built. Lots of copies are being made now by Caterham, but this is an original.
This car is a Toyota MR2, has a 1600 engine in the middle of it, is dated 1986, does about 125 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds. This car is a Ford GT40, was built in 1965 to win Le Mans. They didn't in fact win until 1966, but then won for 3 years on the trot. This car has an engine in the back, 4.7 litre V8 Ford engine, developing 365 brake horsepower, and in the best days at Le Mans was capable of doing over 200 miles an hour. I have owned the car since 1972 and have slowly rebuilt it ever since. And the car is now in probably the most original order and in the same condition as it left the factory.
harvesting at Brook Hall. Peter Brand driving the harvester, Colin Mayhew on the tractor. Spraying near Clay Pit, Paul, John Brand, the driver. This is Constable's Barn. It's the home of Margaret and Manfred Gorlin.
My name is Manfred Gorlin, and this is my wife, Margaret. We were both widowed some years ago, and we married last month and moved into this lovely converted barn, of which we are the first owners. I have been in the hardwood importing business all my working life, and intend to carry on for a few more years. I was born in Poland, and came to this country as a boy just before the war. I've lived in Kent for the past 30 years, but I'm very happy to be living in East Anglia now, because I've always loved it.
Our family is somewhat enlarged. We are now the parents of 8 young adults, and we have 7 grandchildren between us. My profession is in nursing, and in very recent years I've been working at St Helena Hospice in Colchester. At St Helena we give care to the terminally ill and their families, and my sincere hope is that a cure for cancer and other very distressing long-term illnesses will be found in the future. That's it.
The new house at Mill Road. This is unit at Brook Hall. Ferguson tractor, middle 1950s. This is a Belgian blue Frisian cross.
This is a group of ringers from the Brentwood area, all members of the Essex Association of Change Ringers, bringing a quarter peal of Plain Bob Major here at Foxearth on New Year's Eve on a lovely day at the end of December.
This is the allotment, Foxearth. This is what was the Foxearth Working Men's Club. And so ends our year in Foxearth.